Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Andertons TV. My special guest today, live all the way from Long Island in the good old USA, is Snake Sabo. If you know anything about the kind of rock scene that was happening in America through the 80s and the 90s, you'll be familiar with Snake's kind of stuff. But welcome to Andertons.
Thank you. This is an absolute pleasure for me, man. You guys are legendary, so this is great.
Well, look at that green beast of a guitar that you are holding. So thank you to Kramer for setting this interview up. And we will definitely get back to talking about that guitar later on. But, you are in one of the, I guess, probably one of the most famous bands to come out of that era of music. So let's talk about, how you got into playing the guitar and that the journey that led you into to joining Skid Row and some of the fun times you had.
Well, I'll tell you, it started. I grew up in a household of four older brothers, raised by them and my mom. And one of the great things about our house was that there was music constantly being played everywhere. And you had all these different viewpoints that were being expressed. My mom was like an Elvis fan and Sinatra and Andrews Sisters and things like that. My oldest brother was, like a 50s doo-wop guy. And then my next brother was like the Beach Boys and Spooky Tooth and Procol Harum. And then my next brother was like Black Sabbath and Humble Pie and 10 Years After. And that led into Pink Floyd and Kiss and ZZ Top. And then, discovering Aerosmith and Motown music played a big role in my upbringing. So we were exposed, or I was exposed to everything. And the great thing about that was that there was no, defined genres, if you will. It was all music. And if you loved it, you loved it. It didn't matter whether it came from, Muscle Shoals or Detroit or the UK. It didn't matter. I loved everything from the Beatles to Sabbath. And it was such a great education for me. And it still permeates who I am as a musician today.
Do you remember who the first, was there a guitar solo that you remember listening to thinking, whoa, I need to, that's what drew you in? Or were you playing guitar, almost just as part of a musical family?
I didn't start playing guitar till, what would be considered later on, like till I was like 14 and a half, almost 15. I was a full-blown jock, man. I was a baseball player and a basketball player, and I was full on. And then on the fateful day of December 16th, 1977, I went to Madison Square Garden and saw this little band called Kiss. And it changed everything for me. I was so enraptured with what they were doing and what they presented. This larger than life explosion of theatrics and this music that was just bombastic. And it really touched me very deeply. And so when I walked out of there, I knew that I was going to do something musically. I didn't know what yet. It wouldn't be for another year before I found the guitar.
Right.
And that all came about because one of my older brothers had picked up this really cheap acoustic guitar, horrible guitar, and like from the Sears and Roebuck company, and from a catalog. And he also he bought a thing off the television called the Quick Pickin' Fun Strumming Home Guitar Course. And so it would basically consisted of 4 LPs that you would put on your turntable, and it would teach you how to tune, and it would teach you the names of the strings, and then got into chords and things like that. So he was playing this thing for maybe 3 weeks, a month, maybe longer. And then he just gave up on it. And I'm like, aha, here's my opportunity to outdo my brother at something. And that's literally what it was. And he put the guitar down, I picked it up, and I haven't put it down since.
You must have been that. I kind of reminisce about that sort of late 70s period as the time where the true guitar virtuoso was within rock, I suppose, was kind of coming out. So there'd been amazing guitar players before, Jimmy Page and Tony Iommi and stuff like that. But that late 70s, you began to see the sort of the Eddie Van Halen and Steve Vai kind of thing, taking the whole thing to like a crazy another level. So did that suck you in, and did you connect with that, or was there an element of like, oh man, this is like, I'm never going to play, how am I ever going to play like that?
I absolutely connected with it. It was just something that was so inspiring. You had never heard anything like that. And same thing like a couple years later when Randy Rhoads came out, and you would just, that sort of playing, that, like that harmonic minor sort of, the scales and the riffs that he would utilize with the flat fives, much in the same way that Tony Iommi would, that had an impact on me as well. I was like, oh man, like I've never heard, the first Black Sabbath album with the song Black Sabbath. I had never heard anything like that. I mean, my brothers would chase me around with that album cover, scaring the crap out of me. Like, she's coming to get you. She's coming to get you. And it was from there, like hearing Tony Iommi play on that first record and then the subsequent albums as well. And then you had guys like Peter Frampton and Ted Nugent and Joe Perry and Brad Whitford, Michael Schenker, Uli John Roth. Excuse me. And then Eddie comes along and Randy Rhoads as well. And all of a sudden it's a new era of guitar. And I had just started playing at that time. And so when Eddie had come out, and so it was, talk about having aspirations to be something that is so far beyond your reach. It's really something. But I took a notice not only of his, obviously his groundbreaking and life-altering technique and stuff like that, but his songwriting, his rhythmic playing, it all played a part in helping me to become a guitar player. I paid attention to all of it. It wasn't just the guitar histrionics. It was everything. Like I think people forget or did forget how great of a rhythm guitar player he was. And his songwriting is just undeniable.
No, so yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I kind of feel like I grew up playing guitar in the 80s, but I do remember there were some guitar players who were inspired by the level that, I was kind of thinking maybe more Gary Moore and Mark Knopfler and a different kind of, a slightly different vibe, but still technically very proficient. And I do remember myself going like, do I find this inspiring, or do I just find this intimidating? And actually the sort of the grungy and the Britpop thing that happened soon after that, I thought was almost more inspiring, because it made you realize that you didn't have to be technically that brilliant to be a guitar player. So I kind of feel like you grew up probably through in a tougher time where there was an expectation that you'd be a seriously shit hot guitar player if you were going to be in a band,
Well, we were lucky because locally in the club scene in New Jersey, there was some great guitar players. Zach Wild has mentioned, Zach being one of them, but Zach mentioned two guys in particular that we both referenced. A guy by the name of Kenny Dubman, who used to play in a band called Prophet, and then another guy by the name of Dave DiPietro, who played in a band called TT Quick, with Mark Tornillo, who's now the singer for Accept. And those two guys had a profound impact on us as guitar players playing in those club scenes, you know, underage and sneaking into the bars. And it was a really exciting period of time because this deluge of guitar players were hitting it big. Besides the Eddie Van Halen's and the Randy Rhoads, you had Yngwie coming out and Steve Vai. And then you had guys like Brad Gillis and Jeff Watson. And you started Steve Lukather. And you started getting turned on to other stuff too, like Albert Lee and obviously Billy Gibbons. And then, you know, the twin guitar attacks of Judas Priest and Iron Maiden and Aerosmith too, for that matter. And then I got sucked into the whole new wave of British heavy metal too, you know, with Angel Witch and Samson and Tigers of Pentang. And, you know, those things that music had a big impact.
What was the, I'm interested in the kind of the East Coast versus West Coast kind of vibe. Was there because it's all kind of kicking off at this stage going into that sort of, you know, the Skid Row and Bon Jovi and Motley Crue and a kind of a next phase of that sort of style of rock music. Was there a sense that it was musically quite different on the East Coast to the West Coast, or didn't you feel that so much?
No, I think I felt it. I felt that at one point when we were putting Skid Row together, it felt like there was more going on in LA than there was in New Jersey and New York at the time. It just felt like more bands were just getting signed from the West Coast. And so that was inspiring to us because, you know, we wanted to be masters of our domain. And so we worked really, really, really hard. We sat in that garage with propane space heaters and wrote and rewrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and practiced and practiced and practiced because it's what we wanted to do. And we were fortunate enough to have people around us whose opinions really mattered. The guys in Bon Jovi and then, you know, Doc McGee, who was their manager, as well as his brother Scott. And so we had all these valuable opinions. And that's where we learned that good isn't good enough. Like, it's got to be great.
There's a song title there.
Yeah,
there's
right.
A song title. Good isn't good enough.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so for us, we wanted it. We were really, really adamant about honing our chops and our skills, and not just from like a lead guitar player, oh, look at me, I could shred standpoint, because there was so many other people who could out shred us that it was, you know, we just wanted to do our best within our ability. But it was about the songs too. Like writing songs was paramount. It's all great if you could play a great solo. That's awesome and it's impressive. But can you write a great song? You know, can you come up with great chord structures and great melodies and great lyrics? And so that was really what was encompassing us. And then, you know, along with that, can you get 5 guys in a room together who are on the same page and have the same single-minded goal that they're striving for? And so all of it's like this, sort of like this fragile thing that you're navigating. And it's but it was, I guess we just did it, you know. I mean, it was in our nature, it was in our blood. Was it fast from when, you know, because you sort of mentioned as a relatively late starter as a guitar player, how fast was it from that sense of going, right, I've picked up the guitar, now I'm doing some gigs, and now I'm literally in one of the biggest rock bands in the world? I mean, was that pretty mind-blowing at the time, or did it feel, I don't know, did it almost feel more slow motion maybe back then? Well, it's like no one wants to work a day job when they're aspiring to be in a band making music. and we all had day jobs, and it sucked. It was, but you have to find the means and the wherewithal to work your 8-9 hours a day, and then spend 6 hours writing music or 6 hours rehearsing, and just go about it every day and just get better and better. There's always an objective and a goal that's in front of you. Sometimes it's seen further than others. I'll tell you this, as hard as it might have been, like we Rachel and I got together in like 85, 86 is when we started the band. And then we got signed in late 88. And the first record came out in 89. What seemed like seems now like a short period of time was not. Those days were long, long days. And you see other people around you becoming successful, and you love them for it, and you're happy for them. But you want it to be you. You want you to have the success. And then it's really difficult to grasp that it's just not ready yet, because we as musicians have huge egos, and we want to think that everything that we do is the greatest thing since Stairway to Heaven. And it's just not the case. But the whole thing is that the perseverance. We didn't stop. We had some lineup changes in the very beginning that caused a lot of angst and a lot of rough days and nights trying to get through it, trying to find the right people. And then it eventually happens. And then when it does happen and you realize, like, okay, this is the band, like this is for real, and things start moving a little bit faster. We played every bar, every bar that we could play in the New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania area, Maryland, and opened up for as many bands as we possibly could. And we were sponges, man. We learned from the people that we played with and that we went to go see. Like, it was always a learning experience for us. We never thought like, or we've got this down. We weren't like that. We were like, we want to blow everybody away. And the only way we're going to do that is if we learn how to do it.
I'll be honest, when you just did that timeline of was it 88 that you got signed and 89 that the first album came out?
Yeah.
I think that's what you said. In my head, I thought Skid Row was earlier in the 80s, and I'm just wondering, what was the effect that it had on you then, when seemingly by sort of 1990, 91, almost like the world sort of turned it back on that kind of more guitar virtuoso, guitar orientated, big guitar solo kind of music, and went in a different direction. Did you find that had I just wonder, how did that impact on you and as a band and as musicians?
I thought it was discouraging because I'm a fan of, rock guitar. And so it was a little discouraging to see the turn that it had taken. But I love all guitar styles. And so I can appreciate the brilliance of a Tom Petty 3-chord song as much as I can appreciate the virtuosity of a Steve Vai. They all have their place. And when guitar bands started dropping guitar solos from their songwriting, I have to admit I was disappointed, because I always valued the guitar solo. I always felt that it was just another part of telling the story of the song that you created. And sure, certain times it's there for you just to whack off, but I kind of always viewed it as an integral part of the song itself. It was another step towards the conclusion of the song. So that was a bit discouraging, but we never really went down that path. I don't think that Scotty and I or the band in general would be comfortable with that, because that's just not who we are.
No, I get that, and I was just intrigued. It's funny, isn't it? I mean, I suppose the 80s were. It's a distant memory for me now, for all of us, I suppose. And yeah, I do remember though. I do remember that sense of, and I don't know, probably over here, it felt like the Blur Oasis thing changed it more than say the Nirvana thing changed it. Although I appreciate, that was a huge global thing as well. But it's just interesting, and I think I'm with you in the sense of I like to listen to songs where the solo brings a song to some sort of crescendo, and a magical solo for me is still the thing that puts the hair on the back of my neck up, and you just feel.
I mean, picture what Pink Floyd would be without David Gilmour's solos. I mean, it would be Pink.
Yeah,
I mean, it's, to me, what would Queen be without Brian May's solos? I mean, they're just absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
And needless to say, any of the heavily guitar-driven bands, same thing. For us in '92, we had released Slave to the Grind in '91, and we were touring with Pantera and Soundgarden in '92. So trust me, there was no shortage of loud guitars in our camps. And so we relished that. Like, it wasn't just something that we did on stage. It was back in the hotel rooms, and it was on the buses, and you played, man. You played and you created and you had fun. And that's what this thing has always been for me. It's been my outlet. As a kid, I didn't know how to express myself verbally. My communication skills were really abhorrent. I had to find another way to get whatever was inside me out of me. And lo and behold, the guitar came along, and I'm like, oh, like the sounds I can make with this thing. Even very early on, when I'm like barely able to play a G chord. But when I did, wow, like that really meant something. Like it felt like something. And that's what it's been like for me, throughout my life. It's been the one thing that I can turn to. That when I'm going through rough patches of my life, and it's the one thing that stays true to you, because it is you. It's you. You're playing something, and the sound that's being created is from you. Yeah. And that's always been the wondrous and beautiful thing about the guitar. Yeah. Is that it's only limited by your imagination.
So I like that. Talking of tone and guitar and stuff, has your from forgetting the first guitar that you played on, but once you started getting into bands, and particularly when you started doing some of the cutting your own albums and stuff, has your gear journey, have you stayed relatively true to sort of gear that you maybe had back in the day, or has your gear journey taken you all around the houses and?
Oh, everywhere. Everywhere. I mean, because when you're first putting a band together, you don't have money for an amplifier. So you scratch, and, you work whatever day job that you possibly can and borrow whatever money you can. I mean, one of my first, like, quote unquote, real amps, I mean, I had a Univox 112. Okay. Which became the Stage 120, I believe. Or 112, whatever. And that was just similar to this little practice amp I have here. Just a 12-inch speaker with a couple EQ knobs, an overdrive knob, and a master volume. And I loved it because now the sound that I was creating, it wasn't just, it was, and so for me, it was a whole new awakening. And then, you know, like I said, you save up money. I had a Sound City amp, and Sound City was kind of, to me, was like a cheap version of a Marshall.
Yeah.
So I would save money and have it modded out as much as I could by some of the local music stores would mod it out for me and do whatever they did. And it got better, but it wasn't quite the Marshall. And then finally I was able to get my hands on some Marshalls, mostly 50 watts. And that's what I started playing out with. And I always had a tube screamer. That was like my crutch. It still is. I still have the same one, and a chorus pedal and an EQ pedal, like one of those MXR 6-band EQs, and a channel switcher. I also always used for channel switching. I used a Roland Jazz Chorus for my clean sounds. And so I used to A, B, and back and forth between the Marshall and the Roland. And I carried that Roland around with me for a while.
I always have these memories of that sort of late 80s period going, guitar players just got bigger and bigger and bigger racks of stuff. But that doesn't sound like the kind of rig that you went for, or was that something you used at some point?
Don't get me wrong, man. I wanted to have the Bradshaw rig like everybody did. I just couldn't afford it. Really plain and simple, to be honest with you. I mean, when we first got signed, we were still poor. I mean, we didn't have a pot to piss in. And, you know, contrary to what people might think, we were still eating macaroni and cheese, you know, for dinner 6 nights a week. It wasn't like we had this influx of cash all of a sudden. But when we went into work with Michael Wagner, that's when things really began to change and our eyes would open up, because he had just an unbelievable array of guitar amps. And the ADA MP1 had just come out. Yeah. So we started working with that, and we loved it because he had used that on a White Lion record that he did. And Vito is an old friend, and I loved Vito's tone as Scotty did as well. And so we utilized that and created our own tones for the first record out of that, amongst other things like a groove tube head as well, to add some more low end, and a Marshall in there as well to take up some space. But it was a lot of fun doing all this experimentation with all these different amps and stuff like that. And that's when I think our horizons were broadened as far as what we could achieve, and not just through a standard, 50-watt head or whatever, but the technology that was coming across with the stuff like the ADA. That was a big deal to us. That was like a lot of fun to tinker with, and to hear that sound that was coming out of it. And all it had in it was a 12AX7, and it was, but it sounded monstrous.
Is that still, have you stuck with that kind, not ADA, because I know that'll be a sort of a bygone thing, but have you stuck with that kind of straight up kind of valve tone, simple pedal board kind of thing all the way through, or have you gone on a sort of a journey more recently into, I don't know, like a Kemper or a Fractal or something like that?
Well, I'm using Kempers now. Mm-hmm. I have been for the last, few years. It's perfect for touring with. I'm still working on it in the studio, but it's perfect for touring with for sure. Yeah. Because with the power amp built into it, it moves air. You could feel your tone. And that's really essential for me. Like, I need to still have the speakers pushing air for me behind me. It's I don't have it set up where it's like coming out of my monitor wedge or anything like that. I'm like new school and old school. I have the Kemper, but I also have the power amp. So I'm pushing out from my 412s, and I'm still using like the old, 25-watt greenbacks or the 30 watts. Those still work for me. But when we went to do Slave to the Grind, Michael Wagner had turned us on to Rivera amps. Mm-hmm. And they became a huge staple in what we were doing. They were amazing amps.
Yeah.
Amazing. And then so we used them for the whole Slave to the Grind recording and touring and stuff like that. And then in '95, we went on tour with Van Halen and got turned on to the 5150s.
It's mad to think that the 5150, I just sort of think, it doesn't seem that old to me, but you're totally right. He was designing or working with Peavey back in the day, wasn't it? Just to do his own thing. But that is
that's when I started an association with Peavey, who were great, man. They were great. I loved their Wolfgang guitars. I played them a ton.
Yeah.
And I loved the 5150 and even more so the 5152.
Yeah.
So I played those forever. And then when we started doing a bunch of fly-in dates where the production, the local production company would be supplying you with whatever they had, you hope you get a JCM 800 or a 900. Because you're not traveling, you're traveling by plane, you're not traveling by bus for a lot of these things. So you're relying on what the backline companies can provide. And oftentimes that's a JCM 800 or 900, and they're great, but they're so vastly different from one to the other that you kind of don't know what you're getting when you walk into the venue. And that's where the Kemper came in.
I thought you were going to say that's where your trusty tube screamer came in, because you always knew as long as you had that.
All the time. All the time. Saved me so many times.
Yeah.
But the Kemper, when we started working with the Kemper, was actually our bass player, Rachel, was the one who first got one for his studio. And we started working with it. And of course, like all old school idiots, we were... we were like, I don't know. And then we're listening to what we were doing on our demos, and we're like, this sounds really good.
Yeah.
And so went out and got one and started bringing it on the road. And just to have that consistency every night, that you know exactly what you're getting. Your front of house guy knows exactly what he's getting, and it doesn't change.
Yeah.
And it's great. What a magnificent piece of gear.
Just your USB stick. That's all you have to. Guitar in one hand, USB stick in the other. Off we go.
How crazy is that, man?
It's not crazy. Yeah, it's not very rock and roll, is it? But it is what it is. It's as you say, it's got so many upsides for touring. It's just crazy, man.
It really is. You come in with this lunchbox, and like you said, a USB stick, and all of a sudden, you plug in, and people are like, "What?"
Oh, it's mad.
But the profiling nature of it is just mad, crazy.
Yeah. Like
just to be able to profile an amp in a matter of a couple minutes. That blows my mind.
And I guess it's not just the amp, is it? It's the studio sound. It's the sound of, if the engineer mic'd it in a certain way, used a certain console, whatever, the Kemper's capturing that as well. So it's like when the fans and the audience get to hear probably the closest thing that they can to how you wanted it to be when you were recording the song. So anyway.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I'm constantly tinkering with it just to match up the tones from the records as closely as possible. And it's no easy task, let me tell you.
Well, you didn't have the Kemper in the day. Yeah, what you needed was the Kemper in the day, didn't you, to capture it there and then? But of course,
right. And there was there was a lot of time and effort that went into getting those tones. Like just the guitar tone for Monkey Business, the main riff, that took 3 days of me and Michael just going back and forth, and I'm going, nope, it's not what I hear in my head. It's not what I hear in my head. And God bless them for having the patience to, everybody for that matter, for having the patience to allow me to indulge myself. And I like to think that it paid off. It's one of my favorite tones on that record. So
even that, I think, is something that we miss nowadays, is to have a recording process that just allows for that length of time to just get one just get one riff sounding how you want it to sound 3 days. It just doesn't happen. Well, I suppose it doesn't feel like it happens like that anymore. But
no, the process seems. I think you're right. It seems a lot quicker. As time has gone on, I don't know whether we settle for less or we just work faster. I don't know. I like to think that we just work faster. That's what I keep telling myself.
Well, look, so we've talked lots about amps and a little bit about pedals and stuff, but of course we haven't talked about guitars, which is crazy because that's,
yes,
that's the whole point. Now, you said just before we started that where you grew up wasn't far from the Kramer factory and the Kramer sort of head office. So your relationship with Kramer is an enduring one right from the start of your, playing time. So tell us a bit about that and take us through the sort of the Kramer journey and how we've ended up with that awesome green, sort of version of a Baretta. It's super cool, man. But anyway.
Thank you. The Kramer factory was in a town called Neptune, New Jersey, down along the Jersey Shore. And that was roughly about 25 minutes from where I grew up in Sayreville, New Jersey. Now, because it was a Jersey company, and I had been best buds with John Bon Jovi since we were kids. We grew up 3 streets away from each other. And thus, when he put Bon Jovi together, became friends with all the guys in the band. And so when we were forming Skid Row, him and Richie brought us down to Kramer to introduce us to the owner at the time, Dennis Berardi, and meet some of the people, some of the luthiers and some of the people on the assembly lines down there. And we had never been anything like this before. The closest we ever got was a music store. Which ironically is how Rachel and I met, was me working at a music store in Thomas River, New Jersey. So we're putting Skid Row together. The Bon Jovi, John and Richie go, why don't you guys come down to Kramer and just check this out? And it was unbelievable. Like, you just couldn't believe that this was going on in your backyard. All these beautiful guitars that I would see on 48th Street in Manhattan at Sam Ash or Manny's or 48th Street Guitars at the time, and that I never thought I could afford. And there they were being built. And Dennis Berardi, the owner, couldn't have been more gracious. I remember I saw one of the original Gene Simmons axe bases with the aluminum V neck hanging on the wall above his desk in his office. And this is around the time that Eddie was being involved with Kramer as well. And so it was just taking off. It was just huge. They were no small company by any stretch. But they invited us in like we had been stars for years and decades, and treated us as such. And it was really something to behold. We were also very humbled by it. And then they were like, well, let's work together. And, we're like, holy crap. Like, what do you mean, let's work together? And they're like, well, we want to make guitars for you guys. And, make sure you have guitars for the road. And we're like, holy crap. Like, we hadn't even made our first record yet.
Oh, that's cool.
So around that time, I'm working in the music store, still working my day job. And we had the manager of the store was this amazing individual by the name of Paul Unkert. And Paul would run the store, and plus he was also a luthier, and he would build guitars in the back shop of the store, and they would do a mail order business. And so I was like, man, I got to get a guitar made. So we would pick out parts from the catalogs, Warmouth necks and Chandler bodies and stuff like that. And that's what we did. And we started putting the original one of these together. And it was great. And I played it for a while, and it held up, but I needed something a little bit more. So the artwork, this artwork is the original artwork that a guy by a Dennis Klein did, who was an airspray guy. Used to do hot rods and vans and stuff like that. So he was friends with Paul Unkert as well as Rachel's older brother. And so I gave him an idea of what I wanted. I can't draw, so it was just verbalized. And this is what he came up with. And I was like, that's insanity. So I think the original one was on a Chandler body and a Warmoth neck. And then, but the same setup, volume tone, Floyd Rose, reverse headstock. And so I brought it to Kramer, and I was like, this is really cool, but I need like the real deal done to it. So I grabbed that original body because I was so paranoid that we wouldn't be able to replicate it back then. And then they put like a new Kramer reverse headstock neck on it. We added new Floyd Rose. At the time, we were using Seymour Duncan JBs or 59s, but it's essentially the same setup. And I played that guitar every day for years, amongst some other Kramers as well. But this was on the first two records. It was on all those tours. And then Kramer started going downhill. And it was really sad because we loved the people that worked there. They were family to us. And it just started, as sometimes happens. And then they kind of went under. They became more, I think they went through several different phases of ownership, and they were more like a local thing than anything. And so all the people that we had worked with were kind of gone. And so everyone kind of moved on.
We had a cut. Oh, sorry. No, go on. I was only the weirdest thing at NAMM 2020. So just over a year ago now, I'm sitting there with a few of the guys I work with in a Denny's, and there's a dude on the table next to us who must have been in his 70s, really straight looking, chinos, shirt, old school, like 50s hairdo. And he just turned around and he goes, "Excuse me, guys, are you here for the NAMM show?" And I'm doing a really bad accent like that. But he gives me his business card, and he's one of the original owners of Kramer. So I'm guessing, and it's just like, you couldn't picture a guy less likely to have been like an owner of this guitar company. And he was there with his son, and I think, talking about trying to revive some of the original patents that Kramer might have worked on and stuff. But yeah, right. I just sort of had to throw that in. It's just like, it's such a small world that you can be sitting in Denny's and some guy goes, "Yeah, I was, I started Kramer Guitar." It's like, and I can't remember what his name is, but it might have been that guy. Was it Eric or Dennis or
was it Henry? Was it Henry Vaccaro?
I need somebody to give me a. I don't remember, but possibly I can't remember. But anyway, sorry, man. I interrupted you on your.
No. Well, that was a wonderful thing. I mean, I guess we didn't realize how really huge they were because we had become so close with them, and we kind of came and went as we pleased, and we were family. All of us. And we ended up stealing one of their luthiers to be our guitar tech, who went on to become Richie Sambora's guitar tech as well. This guy, Chris Lumpy Hofschneider, God rest his soul, was just salt of the earth and built some amazing guitars. But this kind of got retired for a while. Now, cut to, I'm in LA, so it's about, I don't know, let's just say, for argument's sake, let's say it's about 12 years ago. And I'm in our management office that I'm working with other bands out of in off of Sunset Boulevard, diagonally across from the old Tower Records building. And so it was summertime, and we would have interns come in, Musicians Institute or UCLA or whatever. And one kid came in, and he was a videographer and wanted to intern. And it turned out that he became my intern. And his name is Todd Harapiak. And we hit it off great. I used to just verbally abuse him and destroy him. And he gave it right back. And I was like, I really like this guy. I really like this guy. And he was really cool. And then he finished out his internship, and we kept in touch for a while. And he was always out doing stuff. And he would always bring up this guitar. Like, when are you going to give me that Snake guitar? When are you going to sell me that Snake guitar? When are you going to donate that Snake guitar to my charitable fund? And I was like, never, 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 never. So about 4 years ago, maybe even less, maybe 3 years ago, I'm online, which I'm not a social media guy or anything like that, but I just happened to be reading something from Dave Rude, the guitar player in Tesla, about an Epiphone that he was doing, a white Epiphone Explorer. And he's talking about it. And in that, he thanks Todd Harapiak. And I'm like, that can't be the same Todd. So I figure out, what the hell? I go, ass face, is this still you? And he's like, yeah. And one of the first things he said is, when are we going to do a signature model of your Snake guitar? And I'm like, shut up. I haven't spoken to you in years, and that's the first thing that pops out of your mouth. And he keeps writing back, I'm serious. And I go, okay, we'll do one when you get me one of these. And it was a Carina Explorer. 3 days later, I have a Carina Explorer at my doorstep. I'm like, whoa, you're like serious. He's like, yeah, I'm really serious. He goes, did you know that we bought Kramer? And I go, no, I did not know that. So we're talking, and I still don't think that this is going to happen. Like, this is 30 some years after the fact. But he had a passion for this guitar, and he wanted to see it out in music stores for people to be able to purchase. So I'm down in Nashville. We're working on music. And he sets up a meeting for myself and Scotty to go over and meet Cesar and Jim DeCola and Aljon Go. And as soon as I walk in there, as soon as we walk in there, there's Cesar sitting on a Marshall amp combo, playing his 71 Explorer, and it sounds amazing. And we hit it off. It took about 2 minutes for us to hit it off. We just hit it off incredibly.
I knew Cesar would be part of this story. He's just,
oh, yeah.
He is, obviously, there's probably not a guitar player on the planet that doesn't have some sort of affection for Gibson as a brand with great history and heritage. But there's no doubt about it that the team, or the guy that owned it for a long time, I think alienated a lot of players out there, and Cesar especially. But Cesar and the team, they're just bringing so many people back into the fold, not just professionals like yourself, but customers and music stores, and just people now going, I want to be part of this new thing. There's so much positivity and energy there.
Well, because it was on its last legs, man. And we were heartbroken. Like, I have Gibsons. I've never been endorsed by them, but everybody has Gibsons. And to see that company was this close away from filing bankruptcy and being dissolved was absolutely heartbreaking. I mean, that is an iconic company that played such a huge part in the history of rock and roll, that to have it go under would have been an absolute travesty and a sin. But I'll tell you what, man, as soon as you walked into that place, you could tell that they were for real. Like, they were back being what they were supposed to be, which is a guitar company. They're not an electronics company. They're not a software company. They're a friggin' guitar company. They're Gibson guitars, goddammit, you know? And that was the vibe that came across. And so we spent like 3 hours there and took a tour of every inch of that factory. And you could just sense the enthusiasm that was going on amidst all the people that were working there. It all felt to me like they all had ownership of it. Like they were bringing this brand that they loved dearly for so long, that they were bringing this thing back. And they were going back to what they did best, which was build amazing guitars. You know, not trying to come up with all these crazy ass electronics and stuff like that. Build a great guitar. And that's what they do. And so I was really, as was Scotty, really, really inspired. And of course, I walked out that day with a Les Paul, and that Cesar gifted me. He's like, "Here, this is for you." I'm like, "You've got to be kidding me!" He's like, "Man, I saw you in Argentina in like '92, and this is an honor for me." I'm like, "You're out of your mind! This is crazy." And then we started talking further about this guitar. And it came to fruition really, really, really quick, man. They got in contact with Dennis Klein, who did the original artwork, which he did again. The only difference on this is that it's got a D-tuner on it, which is perfect for me because I need it for going from Slave to the Grind to standard tuning. And then, but the neck is the same. It's like got barely a satin finish on it. The frets are somewhat big, but not too big. The action's amazing, and it's got the pickup instead of a Seymour Duncan. It's got a Jim DeColo wired this pickup for me.
Oh,
so
cool.
I forget what the model number of it is, but it's great sounding. I mean, it's just. I couldn't be more proud.
And the single pickup thing is that often, you know, even post Kramer when you were using other guitars, you just want that bridge pickup and you'll get all your tones from that, or
no, I can't. I don't use this on everything. There's certain things that I need the neck pickup for, but this guitar when I first had it built. That's all I needed. That's what this is. And so because of the D-tuner, I use it for probably 85% of the set that we do.
Fantastic.
And then, you know, I'll use the Les Paul or something like that for the rest of the set.
Well, I've no idea what the audio is going to turn out like on Zoom, but seeing as you've got a little amp, in the corner there, why don't you just give us a little blast of that guitar?
Sure.
Oh man, that guitar was made to do that, wasn't it? It's just that's just perfect. Oh, that's so cool.
It responds really well. This is actually the prototype. This is the guitar that came right out of the box. And I was like, yep. It's all good.
Yeah, we were saying before this, before we started filming, I'm glad you have one, because I've yet to see one yet, and so I've no idea, in terms of what it feels like or sounds like. So it's great that you've got one. You can sort of talk us through it. It looks super cool, man.
Oh, it's fun to play, man. It's like I said, I took this out of the box, and the first time it was played live was about 4 days after that. We had a show, and so I didn't even really throw it through a rig of amps or anything like that. I experimented with it at soundcheck at that first show, and it worked. I mean, I'm thankful. It was a gutsy move, I guess, but more like an idiotic move. I didn't sit there and really work on it. I played it, felt good. I was like, okay, let's bring it to the show, and it was just.
You must have had a sneaky. You must have had a sneaky prototype of that then, over a year ago, I guess, then, because not been many shows in the last 12 months.
Yeah, right. I know. It was funny. They had sent me the body, which is it's a Baretta body. And I'm like, that's fine. That's perfect. It's close enough to what the original was for me. And it just makes it easier because it's part of their line.
That's very cool, man.
But yeah, it's really easy to get around. It's fun to play. The D-Tuna is a huge asset for me. And the pickup screams.
It does. It certainly does. Well, speaking of shows, have you managed to fill your time over the last 8 or 9 months of writing and recording, or are you sort of itching to get and do some stuff, or what is?
Well, you make the attempt to write over Zoom, like we're having a conversation. This is much easier than having a writing session over Zoom. Rachel and I work best when we're in a room together. It's all we've ever done. We've always done it in a room together. So we've done a couple things over Zoom, and a couple good things have come out of it. But it's just so foreign. It's foreign to everybody. Now you just make the most with what you have. And so we'll continue to do more just to be creative and productive. But I got to tell you, man, we played our last show last March, and it's heartbreaking. It's really, really heartbreaking, because not just from the musician side of me, but from the fan side of me. Like, I miss going down the street to see a show. I miss the communal aspect of it. I miss seeing other people thrive in their environment. This is a terrible thing that's going on. And I know that we're getting to a place where we're getting safer and safer, but it's going to be a while. It's going to be a while before people have the trust. Not in all areas, because there's people out there now that are just going buck wild, and I don't know how much that is helping things. I wish people would wear a mask. Yeah, I wish people would just wear a mask and let's get done with this thing already. Yeah. I'm not a political person. I don't understand the politics of that whatsoever. But, for me, I wear a mask wherever I go. The last thing I want is to spread anything or infect my children or my family in any way. And but the one interesting thing is the challenge of all this for me has been maintaining motivation on a daily basis. And some days it's like you're just shredding for hours and hours and hours and hours. And other days you're like, whatever I do sucks. And so, that's the mental thing that goes on. But the good thing for me is that, at least from my viewpoint, I do see light at the end of the tunnel. I think people realize, maybe more so now than ever, how much of a role music plays in our everyday lives. It was becoming background noise for a little while, it felt like. And I don't think that's the case anymore.
Well,
I think that music's being consumed on such a larger level now.
You've only got to look at, just how many people during lockdown around the world decided they wanted to try and learn to play a musical instrument, not just the guitar, but I think the guitars probably was the most popular choice. And no matter how monotonous life has been over the last 9 or 10 months, I kind of know I can 9 times out of 10 turn around, pick my guitar up and play and bring myself to a better place, just make myself feel better, even if it's just in my own head, and I'm very, very thankful for that. And hopefully most musicians will feel something similar about, some solace in that instrument,
I think so. That's the perfect word, is solace. That's why I picked up the guitar, because it was the first thing that offered me some sense of solace. It gave me a sense of release and relief from what was going on in my crazy 15-year-old brain. And still to this day, I still have that crazy 15-year-old brain. And the one thing that I turn to is still this. Whether it's just strumming chords or creating a song or giving my fingers like a chromatic workout or anything, it's there. It's next to me all the time. And I don't take it for granted.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's an animal. It can be frustrating at times too, because you can sit there and, like I said earlier, it's like anything you play, you think sucks. And oftentimes it doesn't. It's just the environment of that particular day that you're in that is sort of defining what's going on in your head.
Yeah. Well, it's a good message, I think, to end on that one, because it's despite everything, the fact that you're still loving playing the guitar and you're coming up with cool music and looking forward to getting touring again. And I know we didn't touch on it, but you were saying hopefully before the year is out, the band will be doing some live shows again. Yeah,
like I said, we have shows booked already. We have a bunch booked in the States. We're doing our best we had dates booked for the UK and Europe last year that were being pushed to this year. And, it looks like they might be pushed even further. And it's just, we're all doing our best to get by and get through this. And, the utmost importance is keeping everybody healthy and safe. And so last thing we want to do is force anything where we're putting people in danger in any way.
Yeah. Well, look, when you are in the UK, please, if you get a morning off, come and pay us a visit, hang out here and we can play some guitar, make some crazy noises. But look, thank you ever so much for taking the time out to show us. Good luck with everything.
The pleasure's absolutely mine. Thank you for taking the time, man. It was great to speak with you, Will.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us, everybody. It's Snake Sabo. Canned applause. Here we go.
Yes, canned applause.
All right, take care, man. See you soon. Cheers.
See you, buddy.